Hi, my name is Newell Davis with World Composting, and today we're going to talk about something a little bit different than the worms that I normally cover. So I have been adding charcoal or biochar to my worm bins lately, and as you can see in my videos, I've been adding this in just small amounts, like just cupfuls of it that's actually like saturated in water. Now, I want to show you the process I use to make this and how I go through about this entire process for me. So this could be different for you. You don't have to follow this process. This is just what I'm doing to make the charcoal that I'm using in my bins myself, or even spreading in my yard, and also giving to friends and family and relatives with the idea of adding that to their plants as well. So this is what I'm doing. Now, I've already shown you before in some videos. I have these kilns right here. I'm sorry if it's a little bit hard to hear me with the air conditioning running, but I have these kilns. This is what I use to make my biochar primarily. So these are cans, and I actually have some fresh ones right here. So you can see right here, as I said, I've had videos on how to do this, but I crimp the edges inside there. I then fold one over so it has these, let me go back to this one over here, these perforated ridges. This is just using a tool that makes aluminum ducting, so that way they can nest inside, and then you fill this up with your wood, your biomass of whatever that might be. I've used peanut shells, I've used wood, I've used leaves, pine cones, pine needles. It's amazing what can go in here. It can come out as just the material that you can use that's just carbon left over, as long as you cook it enough. Now, if it doesn't cook enough, just put it back in the fire and make sure it gets up hot enough, and it'll cook some more. So this is one of my larger containers that I have. This is a good, decent size. It's about a little bit smaller than a log maybe I'd have in a fire. But I can put like 2 or 3 of these in a larger campfire, maybe 2 in a smaller one, and it works pretty well. So that's one of them. Now, sometimes though, I have some smaller stuff I want to use it for, and that's where I have one of these right here. These are just soup cans. Hopefully you can see this pretty well. But these are just soup cans. Now, with soup cans, there is an issue. You really need to kind of pre-burn them. There's a plastic coating in these that does smell pretty bad, which I did not know the first time I went to do that. I didn't think about it. So you want to make sure that you kind of burn these and in a fire without anything in them to make sure that plastic burns out. These cans are coffee cans. These are actually from Costco, and this is also Costco again. These are their peanuts, so they're different sizes, and I kind of like to use you could use 2 of the same size if you wanted to, but I sort of like having one size smaller, so that way I always know which way they're supposed to go. So with that though, I also have a different system right here that I built. Now this is an ammo box. And this is a 50 millimeter ammo box, so it's kind of one of the wider ones. And I drilled some holes in the bottom. Again, this was pre-coated with a paint on it. This is from Harbor Freight. I threw it in the fire, burned off the paint before I used it the first time. I took off the lid and everything. And then also what I did, and actually this is filled with some stuff right now. I don't know if you can see in here. Let me just see if I can take this off. I don't know if you can see. Let me come over there. Hold on. Again, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but there is actually a furnace, like a furnace. Can't think what it's called now, but this is a furnace seal, I guess. It's one of those things that you put in your furnace when you have a seal that goes around it, and it's a fiberglass seal. So I put that around the inside here to sort of seal it. It works pretty well, but could be a little bit better. But with that, that's also on the inside here, so I layered that in. And then you need to make sure that there's some air gaps. So I don't know if you can tell, but I drilled some holes on the bottom on both sides. So just turn this around. So I drilled on both sides, and that's why I made this right here. And this is a nice big box that I can put stuff in. It's very easy to cut things to length in this. You just put a stick. What I do is I actually have an automatic some clippers, and I put a stick right here to this size, and then I just clip just inside. It falls right in, and I just keep moving the branches over and keep clipping them in. Right now in here, which just came out of the burner, these are some pine cones from my yard, nice and dry. Just trying to get rid of some stuff that's some yard waste. And now the question is now that I have all this, what do I do with it? The first thing I'm going to do is I take all of this and I dump it in a bucket with water. Now, not just any water though. I use water that is already microbially active and already has a lot of good stuff in it. And what kind of water is that? Fish tank water. So luckily my son has a fish tank in his room that we've had for I don't know how many years, probably 15 years now. And I actually go into his room. I'm the one who cleans the fish tank since he didn't really want it anymore when he and he's also in college now, so he's not home all the time, so I'm the one who's taking care of it. And I grab all the water out of there and I put it in a bucket and I bring it down to my basement and then I pour it over this charcoal that I have right here. I pour that into the bucket and I pour the water into the bucket and I sort of kind of mix it up in there. But there's one other piece to this process that I have found that is actually really key for me. Now you can crush this up without doing it this way. You can crush it by throwing it in a bag and running it over with your car, or walking over it and everything like that, and that does work. Also, you take this container right here, so when you're done cooking it, you could just dump it into cold water, and that'll really quickly kind of help it become very brittle. So there's a couple ways you can do it. My way though is I usually take these out of the fire, let them sit to the side for a while, and these will sit outside, hopefully not in the rain because they'll rust pretty quickly and come apart, but I'll leave these outside, let them cool down, and then the next morning I'd come back and add them to my container. But I like having things ground up really fine. I really don't want to have big chunks of this because I'm adding these to my bins. I don't want to have big chunks in my house plants. So I have another thing that I do for mine, and that is I run it through as I'm sitting right here. This is actually a sink that is salvaged from one of the secondhand stores. I have a garbage disposal. It's one of the few new things that I purchased for this, which is the garbage disposal and I guess some of the wood to be able to build this little unit right here that's about chest high that I can use to actually run this biochar, or this charcoal at this point, it's biochar I guess at this point, it's been soaking in fish water, through the garbage disposal, grind it up into a very fine dust. There's no dust that goes into the air, and that way it's ready to go into my bins as this nice fine watery mix that I can add. And that's what I've been adding to my systems. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and I'm going to run a whole bunch through this. And I'll talk a little bit over what I'm doing and what I put in here, so that way you can see exactly what's going on. But first, let me show you the bucket that I have and a couple other things. All right, before we begin here, I just want to show you, this is the model of the garbage disposal I have. It is a Lowe's purchase. It's Project Source 3/4 horsepower slimline food waste disposal. So that's what I have in here. I mounted this to this sink myself, and then it just goes into a bucket underneath. But with that, you do need water, which is why I have the fish tank water. I already have it mixed in my bucket. I have over here a little control here to turn on and off the garbage disposal. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that to full. So not too loud, not too bad. I always have my waterproof gloves on here too, since I am working with material. And we just start pouring this in, and this is how I process it. So I grab chunks, I just force it in. And you can hear it processing right away. Now, if I had a lot, this would be way too much to process. All right, this is a little loud, so let's switch to a voiceover here. So with this system, as you can see, I'm using my fingers to push the material down into the garbage disposal. Now, I know the way garbage disposals work and that they have hammers that kind of swing around the outside, so the center is pretty safe. And with that, there's also a fine mesh in there, so everything's going to come out as a sort of a slurry. Now, you will also notice I'm dumping some water in there. You need that water to push everything through that fine mesh that the hammers are turning everything against and grinding everything up against. So you have to make sure you add water. Now, with that, this does come out as a slurry that's really sort of thick and almost like sand in a way. So it works really well for my needs, but if you need something more bulky, this system probably won't work for you. In the end, I'll probably eventually use a wooden tapper to start tapping this stuff down instead of using my fingers, as I think it would be easier in the long run because I can kind of push it down in there a little bit more forcefully than I can with my fingers, where I've got to be very careful. So with that, let's go back to the screen. All right, I'm back. So that's how I process my biochar or charcoal into biochar before I add it to my worm bins. Now, once I add it to my worm bins, that's where it's going to get inoculated with more material. And if I really wanted to, I could even switch it up, and instead of adding it to my worm bins, I could add compost or my castings to this bucket that just drained into, and that would allow it to soak up all of the beneficial material that's in here and kind of do a swap as it sort of integrates into the system. Now, if I was looking to do more of bulky systems, let's say I'm looking to build up some a garden or something like that with new material, I probably wouldn't want to grind this up like I'm doing right now. I'd probably really just want to crush it into bigger pieces, but still have that bulk, so it adds a little bit of bulk material to your garden, so that way it's not quite as compacted. So for me, it's great doing this, but if I was doing something different, feel free to. You can do what you want. The sky's the limit as far as what you can do with this and how you can use it. But I really feel that this is beneficial to gardens. I really feel it's beneficial to lawns. and just to the environment in general. This carbon now is going to be locked up in the soil for years. And if you, depending on the temperature, it can be locked up as I've heard as high as 1,000 years. You know, and this could be something that's a massive way to sequester a lot of carbon, especially as most of the things I'm burning in here, or burn outside, I should say, in my containers and put in here, are materials that would have been sent to a dump or a compost pile that would have eventually off-gassed. So this is locking it in the soil, it's locking it with nutrients, and it's also hopefully fixing my soil that's outside that is primarily clay. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. And I hope that if you have any questions that you can go ahead and feel free to ask them down below. If there's any part of this process you'd like to see up close or have me really cover in detail as far as what I'm doing, let me know and I'll be more than happy to do that. Now, actually, before I go, one other thing. I know that I am using a garbage disposal here and you saw me pushing with my fingers. I probably said it earlier as I did a voiceover, but I'm being very careful, and I know the way garbage disposals work. I probably should be using a wooden tapper, though. That'd be a little bit safer and also a little bit easier in a lot of cases. I'm not really putting my fingers down in the garbage disposal. I'm just kind of sort of pushing stuff down from the top. So with that, again, thank you for watching. And again, please leave your comments down below if you have any questions.